Sawadee Kap, hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're starting a new volume today, which is Volume 3. It's titled Foundations in the Teachings, and this is a book that has a real spectrum of teachings from the Buddha that span essentially his entire teaching career. It's kind of a really nice book to travel with and to be able to really dive into, because after the completion of this book, which has 124 chapters, you're going to be able to have a real spectrum of teachings that are spanning the entire career of the Buddha. And you'll be able to then dive into all the other books and already have a little bit of a background about each individual book. So welcome to all of you guys, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. I'd like to welcome you to our class. And I'll share with you the way that we do this, which is a bit different than we do all of our other programs and courses and retreats. Is what I do is I share the words of the Buddha from the book series that I share, which are his original words and his original teachings. And I invite students that are in Zoom to be able to read a chapter. These chapters are actually quite short. This first chapter here you see is about 4 or 5 sentences. And then after a student will read the chapter, then I'm going to share some teachings on that. And then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you have, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. You can ask questions by putting those into the comment section, or you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. So I'll just go ahead and see if there's anyone in Zoom that would like to read this first chapter. Okay, looks like Pat. Go ahead, sir.
One who points out treasure. Ananda, I shall not treat you as the potter treats the raw damp clay. Repeatedly restraining you, I shall speak to you, Ananda. Repeatedly guiding you of what to avoid, I shall speak to you, Ananda. The truly dedicated will stand test. Regard him as one who points a treasure, the wise one who, seeing your faults, guides you of what to avoid. Stay with that sort of teacher. For the one who stays with the teacher of this sort, things get better, not worse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So this is chapter 1 of this book, and we're going to explore all 10 today as part of getting started in this new book. This is a chapter where the Buddha is talking to people who are maybe interested in being teachers, or people who are seeking a teacher, because there's guidance for you here in both of those situations. This particular discourse is referring to Ananda, which you're going to see him show up quite a bit throughout the Pali Canon, throughout the original words of the Buddha, because Ananda was with the Buddha for a very long period of time. He was with him from essentially the very beginning of his teaching career all the way through to his death. So he was around the Buddha a lot, and he heard a lot of the teachings from the Buddha. We think that he was either his brother-in-law or his cousin, and he was credited with having one of the deepest memories about what the Buddha actually taught during his lifetime. So shortly after his death, when 500 enlightened beings got together to start documenting his teachings, Ananda was one of the ones who essentially really was instrumental in getting the teachings documented. So you're going to actually see his name showing up a lot because he was teaching to Ananda, and Ananda was recounting those teachings. So Ananda here, the Buddha talks to him and says, I shall not treat you as the potter treats the raw, damp clay. Well, if you've ever done any pottery, if you have raw, damp clay, that means you're having to constantly shape it because it's losing its shape very easily, because a piece of pottery that is not raw, that it's actually got some shape to it and it's a little bit more moist, then you're not having to shape it quite as much. Right? So here the Buddha is saying, I'm not going to treat you as a potter treats raw damp clay, which a potter would be treating raw damp clay as very much needing to shape it. Right? He says, repeatedly restraining you, I shall speak to you, Ananda. Right? So he's saying, he's essentially not going to be repeatedly restraining him, because that's what you would do with this raw damp clay, is you'd be constantly shaping it. But that's not the role of a teacher. The role of a teacher isn't to constantly restrain their students. Instead, it's here in this next sentence. He says, repeatedly guiding you of what to avoid, I shall speak to you, Ananda. Right? Because that's what a teacher does, is they share with you the wisdom of the path to enlightenment. They share with you what is wise and what is unwise. And a teacher would just be speaking to their students. They would speak to their students with respect and gratitude and appreciation. And then the students would teach or respond to the teacher in that same way. So everybody and anybody is going to need a teacher unless you were an actual Buddha. One of the biggest myths about the teachings of the Buddha is some people in the world teach that everybody is a Buddha, and that's not actually true. If you studied with me, you know that a Buddha is an individual who's gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then share their teachings for the rest of their life, being dedicated to helping countless people to get to enlightenment, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they'll preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. This type of individual is very rare in the world. So everybody and anybody is going to need teachers. So as you have a teacher, this teacher's role would be to guide you of what to avoid, providing you the wisdom of the natural law of Gotama. And now with that cultivation of wisdom, it's up to you as a student to be able to restrain your own mind. It's not up to the teacher to be constantly restraining you. Then the truly dedicated will stand the test. The reason why the Buddha talks about this is because as you're moving away from cravings, desires, attachments, it can actually be quite painful. You know, when somebody's thinking about the path to enlightenment and getting to this peaceful and joyful mind and focus and concentration and clarity and deep memory, and all your relationships are blossoming and harmonious, all those things that I describe enlightenment as, sometimes people might get the image that you're just kind of walking on clouds, or butterflies are floating around, or you're following a rainbow to enlightenment, right? That's not what it's like, right? There's certain portions of the path to enlightenment that are really enjoyable. As you're having breakthroughs, as you're seeing your mind become more peaceful and joyful, there's plenty of happiness and joy along the path to enlightenment. But there's some parts where it's really, really painful, because it's like if you were walking through a fire, it's really painful when you're in the fire, but when you get to the other side, it would be a lot of fresh air, right? And that's the same way it is when you're getting rid of these cravings, desires, attachments. Because you're getting pleasant feelings from your cravings, desires, attachments, and you have gotten those pleasant feelings for a really long time based in certain cravings, desires, attachments, when you start stepping away from those and you start distancing yourself from the object in order to be able to train your mind to let go, it's very painful because your mind's not getting what it wants. And now when you're in that fire, it can feel very painful. But when your mind fully lets go, that's where the fresh air comes in. Another way to think about this is like joining the mafia. If you join the mafia, and you probably have never joined the mafia, and I don't necessarily suggest that you do, but if you join a mafia, it's like, oh, wow, look at this. I got all these new friends. I got all these new ways to make money. I've got all this protection. You might get all these pleasant feelings when someone first joins the mafia. But if you try to get out of the mafia, boy, would it be really painful, right? And now getting out of the mafia would be really hard. But then if you actually break through and get out of the mafia, now you're free, right? Well, it's the same thing with these cravings, desires, attachments, that you've joined the mafia. You've got all these cravings in your mind. And now you were getting all those pleasant feelings from those things. And as you start distancing yourself from them, it can be quite painful. And then when your mind fully lets go, that's where you might decide to start interacting with that object again, or whatever it is. And now the mind's completely liberated, and you can be peaceful and joyful whether you have that object or you don't. So it takes a lot of dedication, determination, and diligence to walk through this, to walk through the fire, to walk away from the mafia. It takes a lot of dedication. And that's why the Buddha says the truly dedicated will stand the test, because it's like your mind's being challenged. Because as you're experiencing this, your mind's like, nah, come on, let's just go back and have that beer. Let's just go have that wine. It's only going to be one drink. Let's go do that. Or let's go do this other thing, right? The mind's just trying to convince you to go back and do these things. Come on, it's just going to be just a little sip. That's all you need. Come on, right? But you need to be really dedicated to understand the craving, desire, attachment that's there in your mind, and you're having to restrain your mind. So it takes a lot of dedication, determination, and diligence to do that. So the Buddha says, regard him as one who points out treasure, the wise one who, seeing your faults, guides you of what to avoid. Okay, so what he's saying here is that for an individual who's a teacher in helping their students to be able to get to enlightenment, that individual is going to need to point out things for you that you're not seeing yourself. If you were seeing some of these things yourself and you knew that it was wise or unwise to do these things, you wouldn't actually be doing it. So a teacher is going to need to be able to say things like, hey, over here where you were talking with your mom, you were actually quite bitter and harsh and hostile. Not sure if you saw that or not, but this is something to be aware of. Or, over here where you're talking to your brothers and sisters, you had a lot of ego here. That's going to damage your relationship. Or over here where you were talking with your employees or something like that. A teacher's going to need to point things out like that. And they should always do that with politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect. But oftentimes it's very difficult for the student's mind to hear those things because the ego is in there kind of battling you. But a teacher who's teaching in the way that the Buddha taught is they wouldn't be putting a price tag on their classes and courses. They wouldn't have expectations of you, of things that they want from you. They should only be teaching you based on one goal, which is they have compassion for you, concern for your misfortune, and they're interested in seeing you get to enlightenment. So they're not getting anything from you. They're not wanting or expecting anything from you. They're just helping you to become a better and better person. That's what the path to enlightenment is to become a better and better person. So this individual who is pointing out treasure for you and helping you to become a better and better teacher, or a better person, this is a wise one who's seeing your fault, is teaching you of what to avoid. And the Buddha is saying, stay with this sort of teacher. Because if you have this type of person who's in your corner, who's really helping you to become a better and better person, and they don't want anything from you, they don't expect anything from you, they're only motivated out of the kindness of their heart to be able to help you. The Buddha is saying, stay with this sort of teacher. It's really helpful to have this type of person in your corner because life is very challenging. There's a lot of things that you're going to need to face and a lot of wisdom to be able to cultivate in order to be able to live a really good life. And you would like to have this type of person in your corner who doesn't want anything or expect anything from you. You may or may not have relationships like this in your life where the person literally does not want anything from you whatsoever. So if you have that type of person who's pointing out treasure for you, they're essentially saying, hey, look, there's a diamond over here. Hey, there's a ruby over there in the grass. Hey, there's this sapphire over there. And now you can go pick it up. And again, that diamond, that ruby, that sapphire, that's, hey, you've got some ego over here. Hey, you're speaking a little bit harsh over here. You could have done this better over there. And again, a teacher would be wise to do this very respectfully, understanding that their students are very challenged with their ego because they're not yet enlightened. So the Buddha is saying, stay with this sort of teacher. For one who stays with this sort of teacher, things get better, not worse, because this individual is only motivated to see you improve in your day-to-day life. So it's always up to the student to choose who they would like to be a teacher for them. But then once a student has asked a teacher to be able to help them, then the teacher, they could then help this student by pointing out treasure for them, but not restraining them. It's up to the student to restrain themselves because a teacher is not permanent in a student's life. If a student can only restrain their mind because a teacher instructs them to do so and says, hey, stop doing this or stop doing that, or you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that and you shouldn't do this. Well, the student hasn't cultivated the needed wisdom, and the teacher is just sitting there constantly trying to tell them what they should or shouldn't do. Instead, just teach them, guide them, help the students to build wisdom. And then as they do, they can learn how to restrain their own mind. And then for a student, if they're looking for a teacher that is going to be helpful for them, it would be wise for a student to look for a teacher who doesn't have any expectations of you, who doesn't want anything or expect anything from you. They're only there purely to help you to cultivate wisdom by pointing out treasure. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now I'm going to go to chapter 2. Is there someone who would like to read this chapter? By the way, you guys can see all the words here that I share with you guys, helping you guys to understand more about each chapter. This is chapter 2. Okay, it looks like Kristen would like to read. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. Rare one obtains the human state. Monks, suppose that this great earth had become one mass of water, and a man would throw a ring with a single hole upon it. An easterly wind would drive it westward. A westerly wind would drive it eastward. A northerly wind would drive it southward. A southerly wind would drive it northward. There was a blind turtle which would come to the surface once every 100 years. What do you think, monks? Would that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years insert its neck into that ring with a single hole? It would be very rare, venerable sir, that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years would insert its neck into that ring with a single hole. So too, monks, it is rare that one obtains the human state. Rare that a Tathagata, an Arahant, perfectly enlightened one, arises in the world. Rare that the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. You have obtained that human state, monks. A Tathagata, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, has arisen in the world. The teachings and the discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand. This is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand. This is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand. This is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. So whenever you have these similes where the Buddha is describing a certain story, as to best of your ability, what you might decide to do is, after you read it, is just kind of close your eyes and just imagine what it is that he's describing, right? Because this will kind of help bring the teaching to life for you so you can really see it and really understand what he's talking about. So here, this first paragraph, he's saying, suppose this great earth became one mass of water. So essentially, the entire earth is flooded, right? The entire surface of the entire globe in the earth is all water. Now somebody takes a ring with a single hole and they throw it onto this water, and now the wind blows it all over the place. And there's this blind turtle underneath of the water that comes up once every 100 years, and it gets a breath. Well, what's the likelihood of that turtle inserting its neck into that ring with a single hole? And the Buddha was commonly doing this, where he would ask his students questions, right? And then the students would come up with an answer. And then once they have that understanding, then he could actually teach them. So when he asked them this question, they say, oh, it would be rare, venerable sir, that the blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years would insert its neck into that ring with a single hole, right? Because we can see that too. We can imagine that in our mind. One of the things to keep in mind when you're reading this is look at the interaction between the students and the Buddha. You see the Buddha being very respectful to his students, and you see the students being very respectful to the teacher as well. So this is something that's built into a community, that these individuals are together developing their mind on the path to enlightenment, and there's politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect amongst the members of the community. In between the teacher and the students, there's this respect, right? So this particular student replied like it'd be very rare. So then the Buddha follows that up with saying, so too, it is rare that one obtains this human state, right? Getting into this human life is extremely rare. That you're going to see teachings from the Buddha where he talks about how we've all had countless lives in the past. He equates this to water as well. He says that, the blood that we've had coursing through our body in all these previous existences is more than all the water in all the sea. Or the milk that we drank from our mother in our previous lives is more milk than the water of all the seas. So we've had countless rebirths, right? And you may not have independently verified the cycle of rebirth and the 5 realms of existence yet, but there's been countless rebirths in the past. But here you are in this human state. This is the ideal existence, to be able to cultivate your mind and get to enlightenment. Because all those existences, if we were in hell or the animal world or the afflicted spirit realm, we weren't able to get to enlightenment there. But here we are in the human realm. We would have had to have made some very wise decisions in the past to be able to get here into this human realm. And now that you're here, it's very rare to be here. So the message here is don't allow this life to go to waste. Don't be complacent in your growth and development on the path to enlightenment. He says, rare that a Tathagata, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, arises in the world. So this is the way that he would refer to himself, is as a Tathagata. He very rarely referred to himself as the Buddha, although you will see some places where he referred to himself that way because he needed to teach people of what a Buddha actually is. But this word Tathagata, it means the one who's discovered the truth or the one who shares the truth. That's how he most frequently referred to himself. And of course, he was an Arahant, which this is the word that they used during his lifetime to refer to an enlightened being. Anybody who's enlightened is an Arahant, but not everyone is a Tathagata, right? So he was enlightened. And then he refers to himself as the perfectly enlightened one. This is how you would refer to a Buddha, because they're perfectly enlightened. Where the average person might get to enlightenment, but they're going to have a little bit of extra baggage in their mind, some extra things that didn't necessarily lead to their enlightenment, but they're still doing those things. Maybe a meditation here or there, some other things like this. But a Tathagata, a Buddha, a perfectly enlightened one doesn't have that. They've discarded all of that stuff, and what they know is the path to enlightenment. So it's very rare for a Buddha to exist in the world. You'll see it here, and you'll see it in other places in his teachings too. So when you come across things where it shares with you that everybody is a Buddha, and you have Buddha nature, and you will attain Buddhahood and all these other things, you know that it's not true, because you can see it right here in the words of the Buddha, what he's describing, that it's very rare for a Buddha to exist in the world. And then it's very rare for the teachings and discipline proclaimed by a Tathagata, proclaimed by a Buddha, taught by a Buddha, to shine in the world. So during that lifetime, there was individuals who were living during the lifetime of a Buddha, which is very rare, but it's also the very best thing that could ever happen for you, is to be able to live during the lifetime of an actual Buddha and learn directly from that individual. So the Buddha is talking about these three rare things: to get into the human state, to have a Buddha in existence, and for the teachings to be shining in the world. And since his students are actually experiencing that, that's what he's saying here is, hey, you guys are experiencing this. This is what you guys have the opportunity for. And now he encourages them to study the Four Noble Truths, make an effort to learn and understand those, because that's the beginning of the path to enlightenment, understanding discontentedness, the cause of it, the elimination of it, and the path leading to the elimination of it. That's the real beginning point. So you'll see him regularly pointing to that, because that's the very first, most beginning teaching. And you'll see in his words where he actually shares with you in other discourses where he says this is the first teaching that he starts out with each of his brand new students with the Four Noble Truths. And then in a lot of his other teachings, he'll point to the Four Noble Truths regularly. So this is a discourse to help you understand how rare these things are, and to remind yourself to not allow this life to be complacent. So when you're on the fence and it's like, do I scroll social media a little bit more, or should I go meditate? Or should I continue to do this thing, or should I go to class and actually learn some of the teachings of the Buddha, right? These are things that you can contemplate, where you can understand like, no, you know what? This is very rare for me to be experiencing this. Let me go ahead and learn what I need to learn here so that I can continue to make my way and progress on this path to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on chapter 2, rare that one obtains the human state. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So I'll move to the next chapter, which is chapter 3. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, we got a bunch of hands here. We'll just take them in order. Samantha, then Andrew, and Leo.
Consciousness conditions name and form. I have said consciousness conditions name and form, and this is the way that should be understood, Ananda. If consciousness were not to come into the mother's womb, would name and form develop there? No, Venerable Sir. Or if consciousness, having entered the mother's womb, were to be deflected, would name and form come to birth in this life? No, Venerable Sir. And if the consciousness of such a tender young being, boy or girl, were thus cut off, would name and form grow, develop, and mature? No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, Ananda, just this, namely consciousness, is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition of name and form. I have said, name and form conditions consciousness, and this is the way that should be understood, Ananda. If consciousness did not find a resting place in name and form, would there subsequently be an arising and coming to be of birth, aging, death, and discontentedness? No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, Ananda, just this, namely, name and form is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition of consciousness. Thus far, then, Ananda, we can trace birth and decay, death and falling into other states, and being reborn. Thus far extends the way of designation. Thus far extends the way of concepts. Thus far is the sphere of understanding. Thus far, the round goes as far as can be discerned in this life, namely, to name and form together with consciousness.
All right. Thank you, Samantha. So this particular chapter needs a bit of understanding of dependent origination. That's a teaching that you guys haven't learned yet, at least in this program. I haven't done it in this iteration yet. We're going to get to it when we get to volume 5, chapter 14. But let me just share a couple of things with you about dependent origination that'll help you understand this chapter. So the Buddha in dependent origination shows the 12 interlinking steps that lead one from the beginning of kind of the rounds of the cycle of rebirth all the way to the point of discontentedness, and how it is that you keep experiencing this cycle of rebirth over and over and over and over and over again. This is like the detailed work where the Four Noble Truths gives you like a little window into understanding that it's craving, desire, attachment that is causing discontentedness, and that's the cause that's producing continuous rebirth. There's really other factors that are involved, and it ultimately comes back to what's called ignorance or unknowing of true reality, misunderstanding, confusion, misperception in the mind. That's what it all comes back to. And that's why you're always looking to cultivate wisdom and never believing anything. But you need to be able to see the truth through learning, reflecting, and practicing. And that's why you don't believe anything. And through the cultivation of wisdom, you will eradicate this ignorance. And then slowly but surely, you'll basically dismantle dependent origination and all these 12 interlinking steps. So as part of this dependent origination, these interlinking steps, the Buddha, at one point, he gets into consciousness, and he talks about how this ignorance leads to volitional formations leads to consciousness, and consciousness leads to name and form. What consciousness is that's the mind itself. What name and form is this is the physical body. This is the way they would refer to the physical body. There's a detailed description of what name and form is, but what I would encourage you to do is just think about it as the physical body. But you can go see the Buddha's detailed description of what name and form is in volume 5, chapter 14. You'll be able to see exactly how he describes it. He talks about it, and I describe it to help you guys to be able to see what he's talking about. So this mind or this consciousness is what leads to the taking up of this physical body. That's what he says. I have said consciousness, the mind, conditions name and form. If it wasn't for this name and form, if it wasn't for this consciousness coming to the physical body, then the physical body wouldn't exist, right? So he goes through some questions here to be able to help his students be able to see this more clearly, because he's made that statement in the past, but now it needs to be independently verified so that his students can independently verify it. So by a teacher asking a student questions, then the students can think about it, and now they can reply to be able to now independently verify it and thus cultivate wisdom. So he says, if consciousness were not to come into the mother's womb, would name and form develop there? So if a mind wouldn't come into the mother's womb, would the physical body develop there? And the answer from his students is no, it would not, right? Because all you would have would just be an egg and a sperm that's come together, and it's developed some kind of matter, some kind of physical substance, but there was never a mind that came into that to be able to develop into an actual living being. Right. So if the mind and the consciousness didn't come into the mother's womb, this physical body would never develop there. we can see that to be true. Or if consciousness, having entered the mother's womb, were to be deflected, would name and form come to birth in this life, right? So even if there was a consciousness that came into the mother's womb, if it was deflected or rejected, would this physical body actually come to birth in this life? And the answer is no. We can see that very clearly because this is something that can happen, right? Some people might actually call this a miscarriage, right? If this was actually happening, that this is something that's the potential, that there can be an egg and sperm that comes together and the consciousness actually comes, but it's deflected. And now we might call that a miscarriage, but there wasn't even a being there yet because the consciousness never came together with the physical structures to be able to be even considered a being, right? So no, that this physical body wouldn't have developed. And if the consciousness of such a tender young being, boy or girl, were thus cut off, would name and form, grow, develop, and mature. And again, this could actually be considered a true miscarriage where you actually have the egg and sperm there inside the womb. The consciousness has actually come into the womb, but thus now it's been cut off for some reason or another. Would this name and form, would this body continue to grow, develop, and mature? Well, of course not, because the mind isn't there to be able to allow this being to continue to grow and develop. Therefore, Ananda, just this, namely consciousness, is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition of name and form. So if it wasn't for the mind, if it wasn't for a mind coming into the body, we wouldn't have an actual being. I have said name and form, meaning the physical body, conditions consciousness. And this is the way that should be understood, Ananda. These two things are interlinked. Without having a physical body and a mind, there wouldn't be an actual living being there. If consciousness did not find a resting place in name and form, would there subsequently be an arising and coming to be of birth, aging, death, and discontentedness? No. So essentially what the Buddha is getting to is that if a being is not born, then it's not going to experience aging, death, and discontentedness. If you can eliminate birth or rebirth, then you can actually eliminate discontentedness, right? Therefore, just this, namely name and form, is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition of consciousness. Thus far then, Ananda, we can trace birth and decay, death and falling into other states and being reborn. So you can see exactly what is the true linchpin here that's allowing this to occur, which is the consciousness coming into the physical body. So if we can extinguish the consciousness, then there won't be a rebirth. And that's what the rest of dependent origination helps you to be able to see, is how to extinguish consciousness. And then the Buddha goes on here and says, thus far extends the way of designation, thus far extends the way of concepts, thus far is the sphere of understanding, that we can understand this cycle. Thus far the round goes, as far as can be discerned in this life, that we can see exactly what's causing all of this, namely to name and form together with consciousness. So this is a discourse that kind of penetrates into and puts under a magnifying glass a certain portion of dependent origination so that you can dissect it and see that. And then there's other parts of dependent origination that you need to be able to understand and see as well. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Vibhav, you have a question? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, David. I had a question on the name and form conditions consciousness.
Okay.
So my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that like name and form is basically once first the consciousness is conditioning or consciousness is finding root in a name and form. So consciousness gets together with the name and form to create a being.
Mm-hmm.
And then the name and form is conditioning consciousness, because when the being is like going through life and is basically had all the feelings and creating discontentedness, that is basically also conditioning the mind, which then produces rebirth. So in this way, name and form is conditioning your experiences in your daily life. Your six contact with the six senses is conditioning the state of your mind. And then when the mind, when the person is about to die, is basically the state of the mind will then condition the next rebirth.
Yes,
Right? Is that my correct understanding?
Yeah, you've got that right.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So we'll go to this next chapter 4, which Andrew was interested in reading next. If you'd like to read this one, Andrew, you're welcome to. We're not going to actually read the entire discourse, though, because it's really long. We're just going to read the first part of it, and I'll show you where we're going to stop.
Okay. Paying homage to the six directions. Well, Venerable Sir, how should one pay homage to the six directions according to the noble discipline? It would be good if the perfectly enlightened one were to teach me the proper way to pay homage to the six directions according to the noble discipline. Young householder, it is by abandoning the four defilements of action, by not doing evil from the four causes, by not following the six ways of wasting one's substance, through avoiding these 14 evil ways that the noble disciple covers the six directions, and by such practice becomes a conqueror of both worlds, so that all will go well with him in this world and the next, and at the breaking up of the body after death, he will go to a good destination, a heavenly world. What are the four defilements of action that are abandoned? Taking life is one, taking what is not given is one, sexual misconduct is one, false speech is one. These are the four defilements of action that he abandoned. What are the four causes of evil from which to refrain? Evil action springs from craving, it springs from anger, it springs from ignorance, it springs from fear. If the noble disciple does not act out of craving, anger, ignorance, or fear, he will not do evil from any one of the four causes. And which are the six ways of wasting one's substance that he does not follow? Addiction to strong drink and sloth-producing drugs is one way of wasting one's substance. Haunting the streets at unfitting times is one. Attending fairs is one. Being addicted to gambling is one. Keeping unwholesome company is one. Habitual idleness is one. And how, householder's son, does the noble disciple protect the six directions? These six things are to be regarded as the six directions. The east denotes mother and father. The south denotes teachers. The west denotes wife and children. The north denotes friends and companions. The nadir denotes servants, workers, and helpers. The zenith denotes ascetics and Brahmins. Okay,
we're going to stop right there. Andrew, thank you for that. So let me talk about this first part, and then I'll explain kind of how you can approach the latter part, but it's just quite a bit of reading and a lot of time to be able to really dissect that in class, but I can open up to any questions you guys have about the part that we don't discuss. So the Buddha was on his way from one town to another, and he came in contact with an individual who was doing a ritual, a ceremony that was done during that time frame, and from my understanding, it's actually done today as well, where in Brahmanism and Hinduism, they pay respect to the six directions of the compass, and they're doing it through a ritual and a ceremony. And there's, that kind of thing that was going on, and that wasn't part of the teachings of the Buddha at all. So when the Buddha encountered this individual, and more people were starting to understand that he was a Buddha and very wise and understood how to train the mind to get to enlightenment, this individual asked the Buddha, how can I do this, kind of ritual of the six directions that I'm used to doing in this other tradition? How can I do this based in your teachings in the way that you teach it? And that's where the Buddha says, okay, well, I will teach you this. And he talks about abandoning the four defilements of action, by not doing evil for the four causes, by not following the six ways of wasting one's substance, through avoiding these 14 evil ways, that the noble disciple covers the six directions. And by such practice becomes a conqueror of both worlds. Whenever he's talking about the worlds, he's talking about this world, meaning the human world, and all the other realms as well. so that all will go well with him in this world, meaning in this particular life, and the next life as well. And at the breakup of the body after death, he will go to a good destination, a heavenly world. Because that's what Brahmin and Hindus are typically working towards, is getting to a better life after this, right? They're looking to kind of have union with God. And they actually oftentimes have belief in multiple gods, right? So the Buddha was saying, hey, if this is what you're really aspiring for, here's how to actually accomplish that in a real way that's tangible through your practice, not through rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer, but through an actual practice that's going to essentially purify your mind and help you to actually accomplish what it is that you're looking to accomplish. But again, the Buddha's teachings isn't to get to the heavenly world. That's not what he's teaching. He's teaching you how to actually get to enlightenment. But oftentimes, a lot of these household practitioners, they really didn't have the ability to dedicate to learning and growing and developing on the path to be able to get to enlightenment. Even though they were capable of doing that, they didn't oftentimes have that ability because they were just so busy trying to sustain their life, carrying water back and forth to the well, planting food and harvesting food and all the other things you need to do just in order to sustain your life. Where today we've systematized a lot of that stuff, where we actually have a lot of extra time to be able to train the mind. You might even say that a household practitioner has the better chance of getting to enlightenment now than they even did during the lifetime of the Buddha, because you have so much more time available to you. So the Buddha goes on and explains what one would need to do in order to start working on the mind and practicing to be able to now purify the mind and ultimately get to this, result of having a life where you're in the heavenly realm. The same things that lead to life in the heavenly realm are the same things that lead to enlightenment. So whenever the Buddha is talking to someone about what would it take for them to get to the heavenly world, well, those are the same things that it takes for you to get to enlightenment. So you can actually learn from those things, because if your goal is to get to enlightenment, you can learn from that particular discourse. So here where he says, what are the 4 defilements of action that are abandoned? This is where taking life is one, taking what is not given is one, sexual misconduct is one, and false speech is one. Those are the first 4 precepts out of the 5 precepts. And here he's just talking about it in a very general way, where the 5 precepts has much more detail. And you can see that it's not black and white, that there's this gray area that you can navigate. And what the Buddha is teaching you here to be able to purify your moral conduct is to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance, because there's a certain amount of craving in order to go out and kill, to steal from someone, to have sexual misconduct, to have false speech. That's all based in craving, desire, attachment. And there's a certain amount of anger and ill will towards beings to be able to do that as well. So sometimes people look at the 5 precepts as rules or commandments. I don't encourage you to do that, but instead to look at it as helping you to see the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, that the Buddha is helping you to be able to see by you choosing not to do this, you're actually eliminating portion of craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind. And you would need to explore the 5 precepts in detail, because there's much more illuminating language there. It's not what you might have been exposed to, which is, no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. If that's what you currently know about the 5 precepts, the Buddha never taught that. He didn't teach that. That sounds like black and white. It sounds like rules and commandments. By the time we progress forward in this book, you're going to actually see the 5 precepts in the original words of the Buddha, so you can actually study them, and then you can learn them and be able to see what he actually taught on these important topics, because you're going to get better language that's going to help you more fully understand how to navigate this gray area. Then, what are the 4 causes of evil for which to refrain? Well, evil actions spring from craving, anger, which is ill will, and ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. And then there's fear that can motivate the unwise decision making as well. So that's why you're looking to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance, because that's what actually produces fear. So you're looking to get rid of that, purifying the mind of those pollutions. And what are the 6 ways of wasting one's substance that he does not follow? So wasting one's substance, we might think about this like your vitality, your vigor. If you are wasting your vitality, your vigor, you're not actually moving your life forward, right? If you guys are friends or fans of Austin Powers, he might have referred to this as your mojo, right? You're wasting your mojo, right? So you're not interested in wasting your mojo. You would like to actually progress forward in life so you have vigor and vitality. So addiction to strong drink and sloth-producing drugs is a way to waste your substance or waste your vitality, your vigor, your mojo. If you get addicted to any kind of drugs or substances, it's going to hinder you from being able to think clearly, have mindfulness, have concentration, and make wise decisions to move your life forward. Haunting the streets at unfitting times, right? I know I used to do that when I was younger. I used to haunt the streets at plenty of unfitting times, right? That's like going out, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning, doing unwise things, because typically a city becomes a different place during that period of time. If you're interested in doing wholesome things, you'll see that the Buddha teaches you that it's wise to go out into the world during the times where it's light. And that's where people are doing wholesome things. At 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., being out on the streets, there's really not much wholesome that's going on during that period of time. And it would be unwise to be outside doing those kinds of things. But oftentimes we do that. In doing that, it's wasting your substance because you're not interacting with people who are doing wholesome things. Where if you are out that late, you're then probably going to be sleeping until 12, 1, 2, 3 p.m. And now it starts the whole cycle all over again. And you're never coming into contact and building relationships with people who are into wholesome things and building up their life or building up a business or building up some other type of opportunity that could actually be helpful for your life. So by not haunting the streets at unfitting times, you can actually build up your life in a better way. Attending fairs is one. During the lifetime of the Buddha, a fair or a festival was pretty much one of the few things that they actually had for entertainment. So if people were always going to fairs and constantly being interested in festivals and entertainment, then it's ultimately wasting your substance. Where it doesn't mean that you can't do these things or it would be unwise to do these things, but oftentimes people were just going from town to town to town to town, just being interested in always participating in these festivals. We might think about this nowadays like searching social media over and over and over again, or endlessly watching YouTube videos. This would be wasting your substance because you're not making decisions to move your life forward. So you would like to be able to make decisions where you're not doing that, where you're not just indulging in entertainment, but instead you're making decisions to move your life forward with tangible decisions that are going to produce success in your life. Being addicted to gambling is one, because if you're gambling, there's a certain amount of craving there. All of these things are actually based in craving. But here with gambling, an individual wants money and they might be gambling and they're addicted to this gambling. And now you lose your money and you can't pay your rent, or you can't buy food, or you can't pay for that thing that you need in order to move your life forward. So this is going to waste your mojo or waste your substance. Keeping unwholesome company is one. You're going to see the Buddha talks about developing wholesome friends and companions and comrades. This is part of the path to enlightenment. He talks about it as a priority on the path to enlightenment. Because if you surround yourself with people who are into unwholesome things, your mind's going to tend to be influenced by those things. So the Buddha teaches you to not have people in your life who are doing unwholesome things. This isn't what's going to eliminate your discontentedness. If you're around people who are doing unwholesome things and you're experiencing discontentedness, just choosing to leave out of the relationship isn't going to solve your discontentedness. You still need to eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments that are causing it. But it would be unwise to associate with people who are into unwholesome things. If they're killing, stealing, having sexual misconduct, if they're lying, if they're taking substances that cause heedlessness, these are all things that's going to cause havoc in their life because of their choices to do that. But if you choose to associate with these types of people, now those things can affect you. Next thing you know, you get a call from jail that someone's wanting you to bail them out of jail, and you're having to wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning and get all this money and go bail this person out. Or next thing you know, you've got police officers knocking on your door, asking you questions about your friend who's into all these unwholesome things. It's going to drag you down. Essentially, that's what the Buddha is teaching you here about. These are the things that are going to drag you down and make it difficult for you to move your life forward. And then the same thing here with habitual idleness, where you're just complacent, you're sluggish, you're habitually just sitting around and not really doing anything to be able to move your life forward. So these are things that you would like to eliminate as part of your practice. And then ultimately the Buddha talks about these 6 directions, and he goes into different relationships that an individual has, because they would, pay respect to these 6 directions of the compass. And the Buddha is talking about this practice that you can develop that is referring to your mother and father, your teachers, your life partner, your children, if you have those, your friends, companions, any kind of servants, workers, or helpers. This would be like your employees. And then there's ascetics and Brahmins, who are essentially people who are helping people to be able to develop spiritually and develop their life and develop their mind. So there's these 6 things that the Buddha is saying, hey, these are ways that you can conduct yourself in these relationships that's going to produce wholesome results for you. So he teaches you things that you can do in these relationships that are going to promote harmonious relationships for you in each one of these categories. So he's saying, okay, having been supported by your parents, because this first direction is your parents, having been supported by them, it would be wise for you to now support them where needed, right? You maybe take them to the doctor, maybe you bring them some food, maybe you make sure they have clothing, make sure they're bathed, because they did all that stuff for you when you were a child, right? They made sure you brushed your teeth, that you combed your hair, that you had all these other opportunities for education and medical care. And it's wise for us, as our parents age and they're unable to do those things, that we're able to help them with those things, right? That's their Gama, to give back to them. And then I will perform their duties for them, right? Again, attending to certain tasks that you see that they need help with, you can do that for them. I will keep up the family tradition. What this is that during the lifetime of the Buddha, and you have this in some cultures now today too, that if your family is a certain type of skill or certain type of craft, then you would essentially have that same thing, that you would learn that craft from your family, and now you would also practice that same craft. And this is how you build up Gama as a family, that if your family is really well known as blacksmiths or making clothing or making food and having a restaurant, if you got involved in that same craft or business, it would build the Gama for that family, and then the family could have lots of success. Where today we oftentimes don't do that in certain cultures, which is fine, but during the time of the Buddha, they would do these kinds of things. So that's why the Buddha is talking about this. I will be worthy of my heritage, right? Because your family's building a certain name for themselves during the lifetime of the Buddha, and you would like to be worthy of that. After my parents' deaths, I will distribute gifts on their behalf. What this is for is that oftentimes at the time of death, if an individual is attached to their parents and they're grieving and sorrowful and sad, one of the ways to eliminate craving, desire, attachment is to practice generosity. So by you going around and giving gifts out on your parents' behalf, giving out gifts and saying, hey, this is from my parents, and now you're giving this out, this will help your mind to let go of the craving, desire, attachment, helping you to get to peace and joy. If you've done the work before your parents' death, you won't be attached any longer by the time they get to death, and you can experience their death very differently than having craving, desire, attachment and being sorrowful and grieving. That's optional. You don't have to grieve in order to have love. Oftentimes people think it's love that causes grief and sadness, but it's not the love. It's actually the craving, desire, attachment. But as you get to the point where your parents die, if you'd like to honor them and respect them, even if your mind is not sorrowful and grieving, you could actually distribute gifts on their behalf to certain people. And this will help you to maintain their good, wholesome reputation in the community. And if needed, it'll help your mind to be able to let go. So the Buddha is saying, okay, if you've done these 5 things because of the natural law of Gama, these are the 5 things that you will experience as a result. These aren't things that you should expect, because that's going to just set you up for discontentedness. But he's saying this is the cause and effect. If you've done those 5 things for your parents, then what you're going to notice is your parents are going to then restrain you from evil, right? That's what a parent does, right? A parent is going to teach and guide, yes, is going to help their children to learn wisdom. But in certain situations, you're going to need to maybe step into your child's life in order to restrain them from that evil, because their mind is lacking so much wisdom that if they went forward with that, it's going to produce such an unwholesome result for them that it would be unwise as a parent to allow your child to walk down that path and actually make that decision. So there's some rare situations where you actually need to restrain your child from this particular evil that they're headed for, and that they don't actually know that that's what they're headed for. Then a parent would support their children in doing well and doing good, right? Helping them to get education, helping them to get on their own 2 feet, helping them to be able to live a life independently of the parents. The parents are going to then teach this child some skills that are going to help them to be able to sustain their life, whether it's a livelihood or whether it's life skills like preparing food, cleaning their home, things of this nature. And then during the lifetime of the Buddha, this was a very popular thing that the parents would find their child a life partner. Right now, today, we don't do that very much. The children just kind of like go off and find their own life partner. But one of the things that a parent could do is help their child to understand whether it would be a wise life partner or not. Because oftentimes a child is bringing home their potential life partner to meet their parents, and they're looking for advice from their parents on whether or not this would be a good fit. Well, if the parents have eliminated craving, desire, attachment, they can look at this relationship and help their child to make an objective decision. But if the parents are still craving and having attachment to their child, there might not be any suitable partner on the face of the earth. If I would have only married the individual who my family thought would be wise for me to marry, I'd still be single, because every single person I brought home, they didn't like anybody, right? So you need to take that into account of whether or not you're interested in having this advice from your family members or not. And then in due time, hand over their inheritance. This is something that a parent would do if they are going to give inheritance to their children. Oftentimes, parents will give their inheritance to their children before they actually die, so that way, as they're easing into death, their children have the resources that they need in order to be able to help them as they're aging. So this is just one direction that the Buddha is teaching here. You guys can go through all the rest of them and see what the Buddha is recommending for you for all these different relationships. And as I mentioned, it's quite a bit of content, so we don't have time to go through all of that, but I just thought I would go through one of them so you can understand what the Buddha is teaching you here. And I'll just add this one last thing about this one, finding a partner for your child. If you're a parent and that advice that I was talking about, that objective advice, you would only be interested in doing that if your child asks you. You're not interested in giving unsolicited advice to your child about whether or not they should make this person a life partner, but instead only if your children ask you. So let me know what questions you guys have here on the ones that I covered. And then if you've seen any of the others, if you've read before class and you have questions, you can ask me about those as well. So you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom if you like. So Vibhav, you have a question?
Thank you, David. I had a question about the parents, after parents' death, that will distribute gifts on their behalf. So like in Hinduism, there's a bunch of rituals around after, parents die. You have to basically takes 5 to about up to 13 days. You have to have a period of mourning, and you're supposed to provide food to the Brahmins to eat and on a regular basis, and there's a bunch of rituals that go along with it. And a lot of this involves Brahmins, feeding them or giving them gifts and stuff like that. So I was wondering that if, in that case, if you are not looking at it as a ritual, but as what the Buddha is saying here, is distributing gifts on their behalf, like feeding the Brahmins or feeding other people, it basically accomplishes the same purpose where you're not looking at things as a ritual, but looking at as generosity, providing food and gifts to other people. Would that be beneficial the way to look at it?
Yes, that's what I was teaching, that whenever you see generosity being talked about with the Buddha, it's to enhance the quality of your mind. That's what you're doing. There's an added benefit here that it's helping to maintain the reputation of your parents, a good, wholesome reputation. But anytime you see generosity, it's always about eliminating craving, desire, attachment from your mind. That's the purpose of it.
But in this case, you'll be just being generous to Brahmins who are not necessarily on the path and stuff like that. So I guess there will be some benefit, but not the highest benefit in that regard.
Well, here the Buddha's not saying to give gifts to Brahmin. Instead, you're giving gifts to anybody, whether it's your family or your neighbors or coworkers. It's all these different types of people that he's talking about, giving out gifts and distributing them on your parents' behalf.
Yeah, I understand. I guess my question was more in terms of like the rituals that like Hindus have to follow, or not have to follow, but they follow after parents die. That you have to you do that by giving food to Brahmins and a lot of these rituals that happen. I was wondering if looking at those rituals as just like and from the eye of a generosity that you're performing, that you're actually feeding other people, will that still be considered the same?
It's still helping to enhance the quality of your mind anytime you're practicing generosity, even giving a gift to an animal. It's still helping to enhance the quality of your mind. But the significance of that gift and the ability of that gift to produce wholesome results in the world is going to be different from whether you give it to one type of being or another type of being. So that's why when we get to the part about generosity, you'll see the Buddha talk about the increased levels of a benefit that you can actually experience by giving gifts to, all the way from an animal, all the way up to, the entire community of ordained practitioners and beyond, that there's more benefit there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And when I say there's more benefit, it's more benefit to the world, not necessarily to your mind.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Leo, you have a question?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, my question is a little bit different, but I saw a video about alcohol yesterday, and I think it was really interesting because it really shows how dangerous alcohol is for the body and the mind. I think there they said for the brain, but maybe they don't understand that the mind is more affected. But nonetheless, I thought about putting this video into a family group. But then I thought, would it be unsolicited guidance? So I'm not sure. There might be a little bit of craving too, but I thought it's maybe interesting for them to see this video. It's not that long. So I thought, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, if you do that kind of thing sporadically, you can do those kinds of things, because if they choose to look at it, that's a choice that they're making, right? You're not forcing them to look at it. You could get people that are upset and angry and frustrated when they watch it, and they might start blaming you for that. But as long as you understand the truth, so whether you choose to do it or not, it's a choice for you to make. But I wouldn't suggest doing that every week or every month or something like that. But if you do something like that once every 6 months or so, it's something that can have positive effects, because if you found value in it and you think your family would too, you can share those kinds of things, and then it's their choice of whether they look at it or not. But remember that they don't necessarily understand that. So that's where, if they have painful feelings from looking at the video, they can oftentimes attribute it to you. So just understand that that's a potential.
Okay. It could be that they are really attached to alcohol, right? Because it's very common to do it. But this video is really much showing how dangerous it is for the mind and for the body, and how dangerous it is. And so it could be hurtful for some people, right? And it comes from nowhere, right? Someone's setting it, they watch it, and they're like, whoa, okay. So I also thought about maybe asking, like, you guys are interested in a video about alcohol? But maybe I just can send it, put it in the group. That's what I understand from you, that it's my choice. I can just put it in the group, and it's their choice to watch it.
Yeah, you can say, hey, if you guys are interested, here's a short little video about alcohol. And then that way you kind of preface it that way. And yeah, they could get angry. They could get frustrated because it's triggering one of their cravings. But you just need to be able to understand that it's not you or the video that's actually causing them to be angry. It's their craving, it's their desire, their attachment, holding on to the alcohol. And now when they're confronted with this information, they can experience discontentedness. And if you're going to share something like this, you need to do it without any expectation of how they're going to receive it, because they could receive it well, but they could also receive it unwell too. And if it's a large family group, you might actually have some people who receive it well and some people who don't, right? Because of impermanence. So if you're going to share it, just be sure that you protect your mind by understanding that whatever response that comes back to you, it could be favorable or unfavorable, and you need to remain unaffected either way.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to move to the next one. Leo, I think you had volunteered to read. If you'd like to read this next one, you can.
Sure.
This is chapter 5.
Right. 4 worthy deeds to be undertaken with wealth. Householder, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, riches, wealth, righteously gained, the noble disciple undertakes for worthy deeds. What for? First, here householder, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, riches, wealth, righteously gained, the noble disciples makes himself content and pleased and properly maintains himself in contentedness. He makes his parents content and pleased and properly maintains them in contentedness. He makes his wife and children, his slaves, workers, and servants content and pleased and properly maintains them in contentedness. He makes his friends and companions content and pleased and properly maintains them in contentedness. This is the first case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly utilized and used for a worthy cause. Second, again, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, riches, wealth, richly gained, the noble disciple makes provisions against the losses that might arise from fire, floods, kings, thieves, or displeasing heirs. He makes himself secure against them. This is the second case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly employed and used for a worthy cause. Third, again, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, riches, wealth, richly gained, the noble disciple makes the 5 offerings to relatives, guests, ancestors, the king, and the deities. This is the third case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly employed and used for a worthy cause. Again, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, riches, wealth, richly gained, the noble disciple establishes an uplifting offering of alms, an offering that is heavenly, resulting in contentedness, conducive to heaven, to those ascetic and Brahmins who refrain from intoxicants and heedlessness, who are settled in patience and gentleness, who tame the mind, calm the mind, and train the mind to nibbana. This is the fourth case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly employed and used for a worthy cause. These, householder, are the 4 worthy deeds that the noble disciple undertakes with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, riches, wealth, richly gained. But when anyone exhausts wealth and these 4 worthy deeds, that wealth is said to have gone to good use, to have been properly used, to have been utilized for a worthy cause. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is talking about wealth that you acquire. How could you use it for wholesome means? And he's giving 4 things that you could use it for. And he actually puts them in this order for a reason, because you need to actually start with the first one. Because if you're acquiring wealth, you need to first make sure that you and the people around you are whole, because these are the people who are actually helping you to be able to acquire that wealth. So he says, okay, if you've earned this wealth by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of your arms, right? That you've done this work yourself, earned by the sweat of your brow, meaning the sweat on the eyebrow, righteous wealth righteously gained, right? That you haven't had business in weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. Because if you're doing any of those wrong livelihoods, it's causing harm. You're supporting your life off of causing harm. But if you have a righteous wealth that is righteously gained, that means you haven't actually caused harm through the acquiring of your wealth. Okay, and you've done it through your own efforts. The noble disciple, meaning a student who's learning very closely and who's practicing the teachings very well. That's what the phrase or the term noble disciple is. Someone who's practicing the teachings very closely, makes himself content and pleased, and properly maintains himself in contentedness, right? So if you're not practicing the middle way with your wealth, that means you might be giving to everybody else, but here you are barely having any food to eat, or you can barely pay your rent or something like that. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you're whole, right, with your wealth. Some people might say, oh, that's selfish, that's selfish. No, that's making sure that you have loving kindness and compassion for this being who you are. You need to maintain your own ability to sustain your life in the world. So that's why the Buddha says, okay, take care of yourself first. Then your parents, right, need to take care of, ensure that they're having what they need. Your life partner, your children, and your employees, essentially what he's talking about here. These are the people that are the closest to you. You need to make sure all these people are whole, because they're the ones who are supporting you to be able to acquire that wealth. So that's the first one, that you would like to make sure that you've got that covered. Then the second one he talks about here is that you protect your wealth against losses of fire and floods, where today we might think about that as, insurance or something of this nature. If you'd like to have insurance, or if you just have a bunch of cash around, you need to make sure you put it somewhere, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, that's what they had, right? They had gold and silver sitting around. They had to bury it somewhere or put it somewhere to make sure that they could protect it against fire and floods, where today we tend to put it in a bank account or some kind of investment, and that would help protect it against fire and floods, right? Now, when he talks about kings here, during his lifetime, a king kind of ruled over a particular territory. They might have soldiers bust through your door and just start stealing your resources. Where today you might think about that as the government. Not that they can necessarily do that in all places, but if you're paying your taxes, if you're doing the things that you need to do and filing your reports that you need to file, this is going to protect your money against the government. Because if you don't do those things, they could actually barge in and start to seize your property. And then there's thieves, right? People could steal from you. So you'd like to be sure that you protected against that. And again, that could be putting your resources in a bank account or having insurance and things like this. Or displeasing heirs, that if you have a will that you've written out and then you die and people don't know what's in that will, and next thing you know, they're reading your will and all of a sudden all these people are displeased, thinking that they were going to get something and they didn't get anything. Now they might actually fight over your resources once you're dead. So what would be wise is, if you're going to have a will or somehow you're leaving instructions to be able to help people understand what to do with your wealth when you die, talk about that with people before you die. Make sure it's well known by all the people in your family of what's going to happen with these resources when you actually die. And that way, if there's any issue between your family and your relatives, you can actually sort that out before you die. Because otherwise, some families can actually expend more resources fighting over the resources that are available than the actual resources that are available, right? Someone might spend $100,000 to fight for $20,000, right? It's just kind of like a pride thing and a craving thing. But if you sort all that out before you die, then you can make sure that these kinds of things are less likely to occur. So this is the second thing that the Buddha suggests that would be wise for you to do with your money and your resources. The next thing he talks about is making these 5 offerings to relatives and guests and ancestors. So as you have individuals who are coming over to your home as relatives, as you have guests, your ancestors, meaning people who are like elders in your community, the king, he talks about making sure that these people are all well taken care of. you very rarely see the Buddha talking about any kind of deities or anything like that. So I'm not sure where this is coming from or what is being taught here, because the Buddha never taught to make offerings to a deity. It's like not really possible to be able to do that. You don't see that anywhere. So whether this is something that people inserted at some other time, or whether this is just a misunderstanding that somehow made its way into the Pali Canon, I'm not sure. But these first four are things that we understand, right? But making an offering of money to a deity is not something that is even possible. So this is the third one. And then interestingly enough, the fourth one, he talks essentially about himself, right? Brahmins and aesthetics. He wasn't a Brahmin, he was an aesthetic, right? By you making offerings to Brahmins and aesthetics, it's actually helping the teachings that are needed in order to be able to help people get to a better way of life actually come into the world, right? So if you've taken care of all those other three, and now you've actually got some resources that you would like to see help people to get access to these teachings, that's what you would then look for, right? But when the Buddha talks about making offerings to people that could be using these offerings in order to help other people get access to the teachings, he always qualifies it. It's never just give it to any old aesthetic, right? He's talking about people who are actually training their mind. And he gives you guidance here. He says people who are refraining from intoxication or heedlessness, people who are settled in patience and gentleness, people who have tamed their mind, people who have a calm mind, and people who are training the mind for enlightenment or nibbana, right? Because if you can imagine during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were just countless ascetics that had joined him to be able to learn the path, but not all of them were practicing the teachings closely. And if you're making offerings to individuals who aren't practicing the teachings closely, then you're supporting those things. If there's someone who's using drugs and intoxicants and you're making offerings and donations to them, that's where that offering is going to go. If they're gambling or doing other unwise things with that money that they're acquiring as donations, that's where your resources are going. It's not going to have as much impact for the world. So the Buddha always talks about virtuous behavior, that you're looking for ordained practitioners and teachers who have virtuous behavior. And you're not looking at this in a judgmental way. You're using discernment. Everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to wise decision-making or discernment, including where you choose to provide support. So this is the fourth way that the Buddha is saying this would be a good use of your resources and your wealth. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is the 4 ways to ensure that your wealth is going to good use. Okay, I don't see any questions. So let's go to the next chapter. Would someone like to read this chapter, chapter 6? Okay, it looks like Kristen. Go ahead, ma'am.
Repaying one's mother and father. Monks, there are 2 persons that cannot easily be repaid. What 2? One's mother and father. Even if one could carry about one's mother on one shoulder and one's father on the other, and while should have a lifespan of 100 years, live for 100 years, and if one should attend to them by anointing them with balms, by massaging, bathing, and rubbing their limbs, and they even void their urine and excrements there, one still would not have done enough for one's parents, nor would one have repaid them. Even if one were to establish one's parents as the supreme lords and rulers over this great earth, abounding in the 7 treasures, one still would not have done enough for one's parents, nor would one have repaid them. For what reason? Parents are of great help to their children. They bring them up, feed them, and show them the world. But monks, if when one's parents lack confidence, one encourages, settles, and establishes them in confidence. If when one's parents are unwholesome, one encourages, settles, and establishes them in virtuous behavior. If when one's parents are selfish, one encourages, settles, and establishes them in generosity. If when one's parents are unwise, one encourages, settles, and establishes them in wisdom. In such a way, one has done enough for one's parents, repaid them, and done more than enough for them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. So again, this is not another one of those similes where it's really nice to just kind of close the eyes and just kind of imagine what it is that the Buddha is talking about. He's talking about literally having your mom on one shoulder, physically sitting there, and your dad on the other, and you living for 100 years. And while you're walking around with your parents on each shoulder, you're massaging them, you're anointing them with balms, you're bathing them, rubbing their limbs, cleaning up their urine and their excrement. The Buddha is saying you haven't done enough to repay your parents if you've actually done this kind of thing. Even if you establish them as the supreme lords and rulers over the great earth, abounding in 7 treasures, you still haven't done enough to repay them. Well, why? Well, because our parents are of great help. They bring us up, they feed us, they show us the world. They're the ones who helped us to get on our own 2 feet to be able to sustain our life. And being in this life as a human being is the very best thing that could ever happen to you. So there's kind of like this debt of gratitude to repay your parents. And now the Buddha says this is the way that you can actually repay your parents, because those other things don't repay your parents enough. But instead, when your parents lack confidence, you encourage, settle, and establish them in confidence. Then you've done enough for your parents. And there's these 4 different things that he talks about here. Well, whenever he's talking about confidence, he's talking about confidence in him and confidence in his teachings, confidence in the community. That's what he's talking about. That if you have parents that don't understand how true these teachings are, it would be wise to be able to help them. You're not forcing it upon them. You're not trying to, impose this on them. But where you see things that they're having difficulties with, you could actually maybe help them build a little bit of confidence, because as you gain more and more confidence in these teachings and you see that they actually work, you'll know that this is the escape hatch. This is the escape door out of suffering and misery. And that's something that you could potentially help your parents to be able to see. So you need to do that skillfully, where like say your parents are struggling with something. You could be like, the Buddha has a really great teaching that would help you in that situation. And then just see what they say. If they're like, oh yeah, really? What is that teaching? Now they have an open door that you can actually share with them, right? So you'd like to maybe help them to build a little bit of confidence. Maybe every once in a while they're like, hey, how are you doing? How's your life? And you're like, oh, it's going really great. These teachings of the Buddha are helping me so much. I'm experiencing this and that and this and that. You can help them to be able to understand what you're experiencing. Again, you're not pushing it on them. You're not giving them unsolicited advice, but just skillfully here and there. When you notice that your parents are unwholesome, then you encourage, settle, and establish them in virtuous behavior. Maybe they're stealing or lying or having sexual misconduct or other things like this. You might choose to talk to them a little bit and try to help them. This is the way to repay them, because they've had plenty of those types of talks with you as you were growing up. But now that you're learning these teachings, you might find that you're actually becoming wiser than your parents about these natural laws. And now one of the ways to give them their karma back is to be able to help them. But again, you need to do this skillfully, because parents typically don't look at their children as somebody that they can learn from, because they still see you as that little tiny child that's really small and walking around on the ground and, barely able to talk and walk and feed yourself and all those kinds of things. So when we used to do this kind of stuff with our family, me and my wife, we would have our mother sit on a sofa and we would sit down on the floor and we would actually talk to them and try to help them to be able to see things that they weren't seeing for themselves. And then this is a way to establish like, hey, I respect you, but I'm just here to help you to be able to learn these things if you're open to learning them. So you're going to need to find ways to be humble as you're sharing these things and see if they're open to learning about their unwise moral conduct. Then if you see your parents are selfish, where they're unwilling to share, that you might help them to understand generosity, because that's really going to help them to eliminate their craving, desire, attachments, and ultimately help them get to peace and joy, the elimination of discontentedness. And where you see that they're unwise, you could help them to learn the wisdom of the path. But if you've done these things 2 or 3 different times, maybe spread out over a year or 2 or 3, and they're just not interested, well, then you've done enough to repay your parents. You've done more than enough. You shouldn't feel like you have to keep doing it. And you're definitely not interested in pushing or forcing this stuff on anybody. But if you've tried these kinds of things and they're just not interested, well, then hey, I've done enough for my parents. I've tried. And if they choose to stay in their discontentedness, then that's their choice. And you need to be comfortable with that. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions here. You guys probably remember this from some of the other classes where I've shared this. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, it looks like Leo and Pat. So we'll just take you guys in order since you guys have both read before. So go ahead, Leo.
Thank you, Dirk. I would like to ask one thing at the chapter before. Yeah, when is the right time to give this parents guidance? Would you say you need to be in the first stage, or do you have some guidance on that?
It's really up to you. There's no, ideal time. You would like to make sure that you're not angry, right? You're not frustrated, you're not irritated. You still need to practice right intention, right speech, right action. As long as you're practicing those things, then it doesn't matter where you are on the path yourself.
Yeah, and I should really know what I explain them, right? When I ask them, are you interested to get some help here? The Buddha has some really nice teachings on your problem or on what you're struggling with. And they say, yes, I would need to really know this inside and outside, right? What I'm sharing.
Yeah, it would be helpful. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, I can read this, yeah?
Sure.
Affection and hatred are born. First, affection born from affection. Here, monks, one person is desirable, lovable, and agreeable to another. Others treat that person in a way that is desirable, lovable, and agreeable. It occurs to the latter. Others treat that person who is desirable, lovable, and agreeable to me in a way that is desirable, lovable, and agreeable. He thus feels affection for them. It is in this way that affection is born from affection. 2. Hatred born from affection. Here, monks, one person is desirable, lovable, and agreeable to another. Others treat that person in a way that is undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable. It occurs to that latter. Others treat that person who is desirable, lovable, and agreeable to me in a way that is undesirable and unlovable and disagreeable. It thus feels hatred for them. It is in this way that hatred is born from affection. 3. Affection born from hatred. Here, monks, one person is undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable to others. Others treat that person in a way that is undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable. It occurs to the latter. Others treat that person who is undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable to me in a way that is undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable. He thus feels affection for them. It is in this way that affection is born from hatred. 4. Hatred born from hatred. Here, monks, one person is undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable to others. Others treat that person in a way that is desirable, lovable, and agreeable. It occurs to the latter. Others treat that person who is undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable to me in a way that is desirable, lovable, and agreeable. He thus feels hatred for them. It is in this way that hatred is born from hatred.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So here, the Buddha is helping you to see how affection and hatred are born. Of course, all of this is from craving, desire, attachment, but he's showing you how people can kind of band together based on their joint affection or their joint hatred, right? So here, this first one, affection born from affection. So person A is desirable, lovable, and agreeable. And then others treat that person in a desirable, lovable, and agreeable way. And now this person C, now has affection for person B, because person B is treating person A, who they see as being desirable, lovable, and agreeable. They're treating person B is treating person A as desirable, lovable, and agreeable. So now person C has this affection towards person B because of that, because they have affection for the same person that they have affection for. So this is affection born out of affection. Then there's hatred born out of affection. So this one person is desirable, lovable, and agreeable, but then there's person B who treats that person in an undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable way. So now the other person, seeing person A as desirable, lovable, and agreeable, they now, because they see person B treating that person in an undesirable way, they now have those same feelings towards that person. So their hatred, that person sees hatred, is born out of their affection for person A, because person B is hateful towards person A, who you find to be lovable and agreeable. Then there's affection born out of hatred. Here, person A is undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable. But now the next person, person B, is also treating that person in an undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable way. And now because of that, you actually have this affection towards person B because of that. So the other person treats this undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable person in an undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable way too. So now you both are hating the same individual. Person B and yourself are hating person A, and now there's affection here. You'll see people like this that'll band together in their joint hatred towards somebody else, right? And then we've got option 4 here, which is hatred born from hatred. So here, if there's one person who's undesirable, unlovable, and disagreeable, that's the person that you hate, right? And now there's another person who treats that person in a desirable, lovable, and agreeable way. And now because of that, you hate person B, right? This is hatred born out of hatred. Because you hate person A and person B is treating that person in a lovable way, you now hate person B, right? This is hatred born out of hatred. So this is something to keep in mind for yourself, that your mind potentially will do this in the unenlightened state, but also people are going to do this towards you too. Whether you're at work or you're in some organization or your neighbors or something like this, you will see these kinds of things happening among people. And then you'll just understand, right? It doesn't mean you need to step in and actually do anything about this, because you can't change somebody from their own hatred and anger towards you to think of you in any other way. That's their choice. But at least you understand that, oh, this group of people over here are hating on me. That's because they all hate me, and now they're banding together and they have affection towards each other because they all hate, you as an individual. But that hatred is coming from their own mind. So this just helps you to understand how affection and hatred are born, and it helps you to understand the world in the way that the world's working, because that's what the Buddha is helping you to be able to do, is understand the world around you. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this one. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now let's go to the next chapter, chapter 8. And Pat's going to read that one. Go ahead, sir.
The foremost, the best, the distinguished, the supreme, and the finest householder. Householder, the one enjoying sensual pleasures who seeks wealth righteously, without violence, and makes himself joyful and pleased, and shares it and does meritorious deeds, and uses that wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it, and blindly absorbed in it, seeing the danger in it and understanding the escape. He may be praised on 4 grounds. The first ground on which he may be praised is that he seeks wealth righteously without violence. The second ground on which he may be praised is that he makes himself joyful and pleased. The third ground on which he may be praised is that he shares the wealth and does meritorious deeds. The fourth ground on which he may be praised is that he uses that wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it, and blindly absorbed in it, seeing the danger in it and understanding the escape. This person who enjoys sensual pleasures may be praised on these 4 grounds. This householder is the foremost, the best, the distinguished, the supreme, and the finest kind of person who enjoys sensual pleasures. Just as from a cow comes milk, from milk curd, from curd butter, from butter ghee, and from ghee comes cream of ghee, which is reckoned the foremost of all these. So too, this kind of person who enjoys sensual pleasures is the foremost, the best, the distinguished, the supreme, and finest of all those who seek wealth righteously, without violence, and having obtained it, makes himself joyful and pleased, and shares the wealth and does meritorious deeds, and uses that wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it, and blindly absorbed in it, seeing the danger in it and understanding the escape. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here, this is a teaching specifically for household practitioners, helping them to be able to understand about this wealth that you've acquired, how to use it, again, in a wise way. So the Buddha is talking about, wise ways to use this. Well, the first one is that if you've acquired your wealth without causing harm to others, this is something that's wise, right? This is what's going to ensure that you're not causing harm to others and harm isn't coming back to you. So that would be like a first criteria in terms of you acquiring wealth, is making sure you're not having business in weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. And then the Buddha teaches about eliminating scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain. So you need to make sure you understand that as part of the Eightfold Path in right livelihood. Then once you have that wealth, you're making yourself joyful and pleased, making sure that you are spending money on things that you would like to do, right? Whether that's traveling or certain material objects that you need, you're going to need to be able to enjoy that wealth, right? To a certain degree, right? Then the third one here, he says that this individual could be praised by doing meritorious deeds. Practicing to produce meritorious deeds is to use your resources in a way that actually helps others to be able to get access to the teachings. You might choose to support a temple or a teacher, or make the teachings available in your hometown. Maybe you donate some resources to a library or something like this. This is a way of making sure that other people have access to the teachings. So that's a third thing that you might consider to do with your wealth. And then the fourth thing is he's saying that you're not tied to it. You're not obsessed with it, blindly absorbed in it. That you understand that there's a danger in this, that if you allow your mind to hold on to your money really tight, you'll be really happy when your bank account balance is up here, but when it goes down, you'll be sad or frustrated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling. So you need to understand that there's an escape for this, which is the Eightfold Path, training your mind to let go, that you can be joyful in giving and sharing with others. That's why the Buddha teaches generosity. So there's no harm in acquiring wealth. It's just that you need to make sure you're not tied to it. There's actually people who are enlightened, who are very rich and have lots of resources, but they acquired their money righteously without violence. They're making sure that they're joyful and pleased. They're doing meritorious deeds, making sure other people get access to the teachings, and they're not obsessed and tied to their money. So this is how the Buddha is suggesting for you to be able to consider approaching the wealth that you're acquiring. And this is what's going to help you to get to peace and joy around these resources that you're accumulating. And he uses this analogy of milk going all the way to cream of ghee. This is like a product that starts out as raw milk, but as it's refined and refined and refined and refined, it becomes a better and better quality product. And he's using this analogy to describe a household practitioner becoming a better and better and better individual by choosing to practice using wealth in these four ways. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this discourse. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to chapter 9. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Vibhav, and then looks like Kristen's next.
Welfare and peacefulness in the present life. Venerable Sir, we are householders enjoying sensual pleasures, living at home in a house full of children. We use sandalwood from Kasi. We wear garlands, scents, anointments. We receive gold and silver. Let the perfectly enlightened one teach us the teachings in a way that will lead us to our welfare and peacefulness in this present life and in future lives. There are Vyakapaja, the four things that lead to welfare and peacefulness of the householder in this present life. What for? Accomplishment in initiative, accomplishment in protection, wholesome friendship, and balanced living. Accomplishment and initiative. And what is accomplishment and initiative? Here, whatever may be the means by which a householder earns his living, whether by farming, trade, raising cattle, archery, government service, or some other craft, he is skillful and intelligent. He possesses sound and wise decision-making about it in order to carry out and arrange it properly. This is called accomplishment and initiative. Accomplishment in production. And what is accomplishment in production? Here, a householder sets up protection and guard over the wealth he has acquired by initiative and energy, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth righteously gained, thinking, how can I prevent kings and thieves from taking it, fire from burning it, floods from sweeping it off, and displeasing airs from taking it? This is called accomplishment in production. Wholesome friendship. And what is wholesome friendship? Here, in whatever village or town a householder lives, he associates with the householders or their sons, whether young but of mature virtue, or old and of mature virtue, who are accomplished in confidence, virtuous behavior, moral conduct, generosity, and wisdom. He converses with them and engages in discussions with them. To the extent that they are accomplished in confidence, he emulates them with respect of their accomplishment and confidence. To the extent that their accomplishment in virtuous behavior, moral conduct, he emulates them with respect to their accomplishment in virtuous behavior. To the extent that they are accomplished in generosity, he emulates them with their accomplishment in generosity. To the extent that they are accomplished in wisdom, he emulates them with respect to their accomplishment in wisdom. This is called wholesome friendship. Balanced living. And what is balanced living? Here, a householder knows his income and expenditures and leads a balanced life, neither too extravagant nor too frugal, aware. In this way, my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reverse. Just as an appraiser or his apprentice holding up a scale knows, by so much it has dipped down, by so much it has gone up, so a householder knows his income and expenditures and leads a balanced life, neither too extravagant nor too frugal, aware. In this way, my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reverse. If this householder has a small income but lives luxuriously, others would say of him, this householder eats his wealth just like an eater of figs. But if he has a large income but lives sparingly, others would say of him, this householder may even starve himself. But it is called balanced living when a householder knows his income and expenditures and leads a balanced life, neither too extravagant nor too frugal, aware. In this way, my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reverse. This is called balanced living. These are the 4 things that lead to the welfare and peacefulness of a householder in this very life. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. So while this chapter is titled of the welfare and peacefulness in the present life, this person is asking a question about the present life and future lives. Whenever you see them talking about, benefit in the future lives, the same things that are going to benefit you in the future life are the same thing that's going to benefit you in the present life too. So that's where you can actually learn, because obviously you're not interested in rebirth and coming back and keep experiencing this over and over and over again. Instead, you would like to get to a wonderful life now in the present life. So that's what the Buddha is teaching, is these 4 things: accomplishment and initiative, protection, wholesome friendship, and balanced living. So this first one, he's talking about how you perform your livelihood, that doing so wisely, that you make wise decisions to carry out the work that you're doing. Whereas if you're haphazard in your livelihood and you're making unwise decisions, it's not going to produce beneficial results for you in your day-to-day life. So you need to apply initiative to making wise decisions in your livelihood. Then, as you've acquired a certain amount of wealth, that you protect it. We've already talked about these in a previous discourse. That's accomplishment and protection, making sure that you've protected your wealth so that way the work that you're doing, it's actually secure. Then the Buddha is talking here about wholesome friends. You're going to see he talks about this in other discourses as well, because you need to have people around you who are into wholesome things. This is one of the reasons why people oftentimes get to know members of a community that they're learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha with, because they know that these people are into wholesome things. And now, as you're around those individuals, the Buddha is saying, okay, as they're accomplished in confidence, if they're accomplished in virtuous behavior, if they're accomplished in generosity, they're accomplished in wisdom, you can actually emulate that, meaning that you can use that as a role model to be able to help you bring your practice up. Whereas if you have people that are into unwholesome things and they're doing things that are unwise, now you're going to bring yourself down to that. So you would like to be making friends that are doing wholesome things, and then you can observe their life, and where you see they're doing wise things, you can emulate that in terms of your own decision making for your life. And then balanced living here, the Buddha gives you some guidance about how to live in a way that is helpful, that your income exceeds your expenditures, Whereas if you have this the other way around, where your expenditures exceed your income, you're just digging a deeper and deeper hole for yourself. And with craving, desire, attachment in the mind, there's a potential that an individual is living their life that way. And now each day you're going deeper and deeper into debt. And that's a burden that you're having to carry around. And you're not interested in that. So you would like to get to a point where your income is higher than your expenditures. And that might mean that you need to look at your expenditures and, step back away from those. Because if you've had a change in your income, because income can change over the course of your life due to impermanence, where if you're living your life in a certain way and your income changes, you might be unwilling to back off of your expenditures. But you're going to need to be willing to do that and realize that it's unwise to continue to cling to this lifestyle where your expenditures are higher than your income. So you're going to need to monitor that about your life so that way you can build up your life and you can have this balanced living, because it's going to put you under more and more pressure if your expenditures are higher than your income. So you'd like to reverse this, and this is going to help you to get to a more balanced life where you don't have to walk around with that pressure of digging yourself into a deeper and deeper hole. So let me know what questions you guys have here. These are 4 things that the Buddha is teaching you about how to get to welfare and peacefulness in this present life. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to this last one, chapter 10, which, if I remember, this is very similar to the one that we just read, but this is now welfare and peacefulness in future life. But remember, these same things are things that you would like to be able to practice in this life, because it's going to lead to a wonderful life in this life as well. So Kristen was interested in reading this one, so go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. 4 things leading to the welfare and peacefulness in future lives. There are Bhagavaja, these 4 things that lead to a householder's welfare and peacefulness in future lives. What 4? 1, accomplishment and confidence. 2, accomplishment and virtuous behavior. 3, accomplishment and generosity. And 4, accomplishment and wisdom. And what is accomplishment and confidence? Here, a householder is endowed with confidence. He places confidence in the enlightenment of the Tathagata. Thus, the perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate, knower of the world, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the fortunate one, the perfectly enlightened one. This is called accomplishment and confidence. And what is accomplishment and virtuous behavior? Here, a householder abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. This is called accomplishment and virtuous behavior. And what is accomplishment and generosity? Here, a householder resides at home with a mind free of the stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in letting go, one devoted in charity, joyful in giving and sharing. This is called accomplishment and generosity. And what is accomplishment and wisdom? Here, a householder is wise. He possesses the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative and leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness. This is called accomplishment and wisdom. These are the 4 things that lead to the welfare and peacefulness of a householder in future lives. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. So these 4 things, yes, would lead to welfare and peacefulness in the future life, but it's going to lead to welfare and peacefulness in this life too. So that's why you would like to pay attention to these and practice these things in this life as well. So there's confidence, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom. As I mentioned, anytime you see the Buddha talking about confidence, he's talking about confidence in him and the teachings, because that's what's ultimately going to lead to an individual being interested to be able to learn the teachings that's actually going to lead to your enlightenment. So in terms of getting to peacefulness and welfare in this life, if you have confidence in the Buddha, that means you're going to learn these teachings, you're going to practice them, and you're going to see it leads to your welfare and peacefulness. where if you didn't have that confidence and you had significant doubts in your mind, you're not even going to give the teachings the time of day. And therefore, you're not going to get to peacefulness and welfare in this particular life. Then there's this virtuous behavior, that if you're practicing this virtuous behavior, you've eliminated a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind, and that's going to lead to peacefulness and welfare in this life. These are the 5 precepts: the destruction of life, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, false speech, and then any substances that cause heedlessness. So you'd like to explore those to make sure you know them in their entirety, because here, this is just kind of a shorthand way of referring to them. But this would be the virtuous behavior that you would focus on when you're first getting started, is to improve your moral conduct to this degree, because that's going to knock down a significant amount of unwise decisions that you could potentially be making in your day-to-day life. And that's going to lead to peacefulness and welfare in your life. Same thing with generosity. Generosity is training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So you would like to be regularly, freely generous, living open-handedly and being joyful in that. Because when you're holding on and you're having this selfishness that the Buddha describes here as a stain, it's going to produce discontentedness in the mind. So you're looking to not do that. You're looking to counteract that, where you're not allowing the mind to hold on, but instead you're giving and sharing with others. That's going to help your mind to eliminate its discontentedness, thus leading to your peacefulness and welfare. Then there's the accomplishment in wisdom, that you understand the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away. What the Buddha is talking about here is the universal truth of impermanence, that you're wise. That's the very first teaching that you need in order to be able to make your way into the Four Noble Truths and then beyond. So if you discern the arising and passing away, then that means you understand the universal truth of impermanence, which is noble and penetrative. It helps you to be able to see, oh my gosh, this mind is craving permanence while everything in the world around me is impermanent. Wow, I need to fix this. And that's why it leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness, is understanding that universal truth of impermanence. And that's helping you to kind of walk through the door to be able to understand the Four Noble Truths. And this is accomplishment in wisdom. So let me know if you guys have questions on these 4 things that are going to lead to your peacefulness and welfare, yes, in future lives, but also in this life as well. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is end class by just thanking all of you guys. Thank you for reading. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for just participating, whether it's in the live class or on the replay. Thank you for being dedicated to learning and growing and developing and becoming a better and better person. We're going to be exploring the next 10 chapters in this book. We're going to be in this book for a while. It's 124 chapters. So we're probably going to be in this book close to about 3 months. Yeah, we'll be 3 months in this book. So take your time gradually reading it before and or after class, reading the words of the Buddha, the things that I share with you, and then doing any kind of research on the discourses if that's what you need to do. And you're welcome to ask me questions either in our Facebook group. You can send me messages. You can schedule personal guidance, or you can ask questions in these live classes as well. So if you have a question, you can wait for class to ask it if you like, but you can also ask it at any time during the week as well. So feel free to reach out anytime you need help. Tomorrow in our group learning program, I'm going to be in Volume 1, Chapter 2, which is titled Why Study the Teachings of the Buddha. That's going to be at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Thai time. Tomorrow at 1:30 at Wat Umong here in Chiang Mai, I'm going to be sharing some teachings over there. They've invited me to come over. There's a big event that they invited me to, so you guys are welcome to come there if you like, for those of you guys that are local. It's not going to be live streamed, but I'm going to be teaching what is true love. Since today is Valentine's Day, tomorrow is a great topic for that particular event. So we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation together, and then I'm going to be teaching that. At 6:30 at the temple, then we have our regular Sunday night meditation. And then all next week, I'm going to be teaching the Harmony and Relationships course to help you build harmony in your relationships. So these are options that you guys can attend here or online. Looks like Alberto has a question. Go ahead, sir.
If you can stay for a few minutes with us after class.
Sure, I can stick around.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So again, thank you all for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Be well and take care. Sawadee-ka.
Mhm.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.